Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel's Iron Dome intercepts 3 missiles in Eilat. Archaeologists are set to break ground at a major biblical site in the Holy Land. And get ready for our new segment, Ask Israel, where we hit the streets to get Israelis to answer our favorite questions. I'm Natasha Kirchuk here with the latest news in Israel. We open with breaking news. 4 people have been lightly injured following a terror attack in Petah Tikva, a city in central Israel. A 30-year-old woman and both a man and woman in their 50s are apparently being treated in a Tel Aviv hospital for gunshot wounds to the legs. Another man has reportedly suffered a stab wound to his upper body. The shooting took place in an outdoor market and police say it's being considered a terror attack. The suspect is a resident of the West Bank, and he was captured by police officers with the gun used in the attack. Israeli security forces are combing areas in Eilat to clear debris from several rockets that were fired at the southern resort city by Islamic State terrorists last night. 3 of the missiles were shot down by the Iron Dome, although the defense system wasn't deployed to intercept a 4th rocket, after it was clear it would fall in an open field. Some fragments of the projectiles were reportedly found in a hotel swimming pool at the Red Sea resort city. No injuries or damage were caused, although 5 people were treated for anxiety attacks. The Islamic State-linked Sinai province terror group is claiming responsibility for firing the rockets at the Jewish state from the Egyptian peninsula, where they've been battling forces in the Arab Republic. Joining us now in the studio is Eran Kurtz, a witness who was at the scene of the Eilat missile attack. Hi, Eran.
Hi, Natasha.
So I understand you were in Eilat when everything took place. Tell us about what you saw.
Yeah, we were coming out of a pub, me and 2 friends, and we were just dropping off a friend. We opened the door of the car, and we were talking a little bit, and then we heard this loud noise. It was like a plane taking off. We thought it's a plane taking off, but it was the sound was very loud, and apparently it was the Iron Dome missiles coming out. And then we heard the siren, so we understood that there's a missile attack, and we went out of the car, looked to the sky, and we saw lots of flares. You know, they're coming out of the Iron Dome missiles, and then we dropped him off. I went to my house, and the other friend went to his house. You know, everybody went to see what's happening with their families, and there were people running in the streets. I saw the neighbors sitting in the staircase, really frightened. Everybody was scared, but it was very short. We heard a lot of explosions, but it was a short thing. It wasn't. It didn't take long.
Right. Now, you know, Eilat is obviously not usually a scene of violence. It's one of the rarest cities in Israel that isn't usually affected by these issues. But who did people automatically assume that the missiles were coming from?
Well, we know that missiles are coming from Sinai. 2014 was the last time we had missiles fired at Eilat. So we assumed it was coming from Egypt, from Sinai Desert, but you know, it could have come from Jordan also. And you know, we have Saudi Arabia, we have the Saudi border, the Jordanian border, and the Egyptian border, all very close. So we didn't know, but we figured it's coming from Sinai.
All right. Well, I'm very, very glad to hear that you're safe and that your family is safe. Thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us.
Thank you, and let me invite all the people who are watching us now. Come to Eilat. It's a very quiet and very exciting place to visit.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it still is.
Toda.
Now, just hours before southern Israel was attacked, a mortar shell fired from Syria hit northern Israel, prompting the IDF to return fire at a Syrian army position in response. While Israeli military officials aren't offering details other than to confirm a direct hit in enemy territory, Syrian state media is reporting that Israeli helicopters were involved in the attack on its army base. The sources are claiming that while there was some damage, no injuries were caused. Fortunately, no Israeli civilians were hurt either when the mortar hit the Jewish state side of the northern Golan Heights. The tank shell flew over the frontier in the midst of ongoing heavy clashes between Syrian government troops and opposition forces, in the demilitarized zone between the two countries. Regime soldiers were also reportedly shelling a nearby Syrian village with artillery at the time. Israel has repeatedly made it clear that the Syrian government will be held responsible for any spillover violence stemming from its bloody civil war. Meanwhile, Israeli military officials are denying Hamas claims that the Jewish state carried out an airstrike early this morning in the southern Gaza Strip. 2 Palestinians were reportedly killed and 5 others injured in some sort of an incident there, but Israel says it had nothing to do with it. Israel is sadly no stranger to security threats, and in the past few days, the Jewish state has seen an apparent uptick in attempted attacks and threats of violence. Our guest in the studio today is Knesset member and a member of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, Sharon Haskel, to help elaborate on what Israel is facing. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
So let's begin with, the recent attacks that we've been seeing coming out of the ISIS affiliate in the Egyptian Sinai. What do you make of the rockets and this attack and these recent skirmishes on our border?
Well, I think it's a desperate attempt of either Hamas or militant groups in the Gaza Strip, first of all, to try and save themselves. If you've been watching in the past few weeks, there have been huge demonstrations against Hamas. Some Palestinians are getting sick and tired from their abusive government. They understand that the Hamas is not leading them to a brighter or a better future, rather inflict more violence and hatred and more, poverty within their areas. And so I think this might be one of their last attempts in order to try and maybe, if you could say, save somewhat of their reputation in front, showing to the public as if they're fighting Israel. I'll tell you what, there's some speculation as well that it's actually an ISIS cell that came out of the Gaza Strip. We know that the Sinai Desert is quite a dangerous area. It's a nest for terror in the past few years. The Egyptians are trying to combat that terrorism that is based there as well. But up until yesterday, we very rarely saw any attempt of attacks. Usually we would get them from our northern border, around the Golan Heights. Some extreme groups will try to...
well, so I guess the question is, is Israel preparing for more potential attacks by ISIS? Or, I mean, how relevant is that threat to Israel right now?
The threats of terrorism are a real threat, not just for Israel, but for the entire world. It is advancing aggressively. We were able to hold them back by having a very strong deterrence towards them. But obviously, it is a possibility in the eyes of Israel that there might be more attempts of attacks. This is something, though, that we have been ready since the beginning of the Arab Spring as well, for those cases that might happen, and we're ready for it now as well.
Now, speaking of preparing for threats, we've seen recent reports showing that the Hamas terror group is back to its pre-2014 strength from before the Gaza conflict with Israel in 2014. Now, this is in respect to terror tunnels and rockets and armed forces. How is Israel planning on fighting this growing threat?
So it's important to say that they're not back to their full forces. There's going to be a long period of time until they will be able, but this is something that we're watching up closely because we are worried about it. But any kind of attack will be answered. We will not stay silent anymore. The life of our citizens are not less of a value from other citizens, and therefore we have to protect them.
Is the approach going to be different, though, this time around, given, these reports that we're also seeing come out about how the Gaza war was not handled correctly?
I wouldn't say it wasn't handled correctly. I think we handled it quite well. Obviously, it's been quiet for a very long period of time. That's why we also let a lot of merchandise into Gaza, assisted in reconstruction of Gaza. We helped building a desalination plant for Gaza and a sewage treatment plant. So there's actually quite a good correspondence in the side of Israel, because it was quite quiet and there wasn't any attacks. If they're going to change this situation and will start those attacks again, Israel will answer in the same way we've answered before. We will not take any threats, any missiles being shot on civilians, and so...
Now, Israel has also offered humanitarian or more humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip in exchange for getting two bodies of IDF soldiers that are being held by Hamas, and also two Israelis that are currently being held by Hamas. Is there a chance that Hamas will accept such a deal?
From Hamas from the spokesperson of Hamas, Israel has been trying to create contacts about those soldiers. The policies of Israel is that we don't negotiate with terrorists, and so this is the government position at this point. I hope, and we will do anything that we can in order to bring back those bodies back to their families. It is very important, but at the same time, we have to make sure we don't create a new threat that might danger another Israeli citizens.
Great, thank you so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Egypt is now easing restrictions at its tightly controlled border with the Gaza Strip in a sign of improving relations with the Palestinian territory's Islamist rulers. Truckloads of goods are now seen rolling through Egypt's crossing into Gaza, even though passage was limited to only human travelers in the past. Both Egypt and Israel routinely destroy Hamas tunnels to prevent weapons and other contraband from reaching the territory's terrorist rulers. But just last month alone, Cairo allowed at least 20,000 tons of supplies through that include cement, steel, and lumber, which could potentially be used to build more terror tunnels.
يعني في حال استمر انسياب البضائع من جمهورية مصر العربية عبر معبر رفح البري، وكان هناك في سهولة في إدخال هذه البضائع وعلى رأسها مواد البناء التي يحتاجها قطاع غزة، نتوقع بأن يتم استيراد ما يزيد عن $1 مليار من جمهورية مصر العربية خلال عام 2017.
هذا التطور السياسي يقابل بعض الانفراجات على المستوى الإنساني والاقتصادي المرتبطة بالتسهيلات المصرية الحاصلة كلما فتح المعبر باتجاه قطاع غزة من خلال إدخال العديد من البضائع، ونشهد اليوم تحسن وليس في الكميات فقط لكن بالنوعيات وتوسع ما يسمى بالتعددية في المنتجات. هذا الأمر ملحوظ ومهم، وهو انعكاس عن تطور إيجابي على المستوى السياسي والأمني بين مصر وغزة.
In the past, Egypt accused Hamas of aiding the Sinai province terror group, although as ILTV reported only yesterday, there's been a recent falling out between the two Islamist groups, since quite a few Hamas commandos have been defecting to the ISIS faction. Cairo's now apparently trying to capitalize on that discord. Whatever the reason, Hamas is welcoming the new policy.
هي مرحلة مهمة في تاريخ العلاقات المصرية مع حركة حماس وترتيب الأوضاع مع قطاع غزة، وأيضا كان نقاش هناك بشكل واضح وجدي في قضية الوضع الفلسطيني الداخلي والمصالحة الفلسطينية، وفي ترتيبات فتح معبر رفح وضمان دخول سهل لحركة البضائع والأفراد.
Israel, meanwhile, is continuing to heavily monitor all goods that pass through its own crossing into Gaza. Even though several restrictions have also been eased in recent years, there's still a ban on many items. Some include building materials and fertilizer that could be used to make explosives, or even underground passages into the Jewish state to commit terrorist acts against Israelis. It has just been released for publication that a secret cash pipeline run by Islamist terrorists between Gaza and operatives in the West Bank has been busted by special undercover Israeli security services. And one of the Palestinians who's confessed to being involved worked for a contractor employed by an official U.S. aid agency. The Shin Bet security service just revealed that it discovered a new system used by the Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Gaza to get money for terror activities to their loyalists in the Palestinian Authority. Debit cards linked to bank accounts flushed with funds were delivered through the mail or by couriers who smuggled them through the Erez crossing from Gaza into Israel. All the West Bank terrorists then had to do was head out to the nearest ATM. Several suspects involved in the scheme were arrested this past November and December. One 26-year-old tractor driver from Gaza had been authorized to enter Israel to work for a Palestinian contractor who was doing projects for the American government's U.S. aid agency in the West Bank. Shin Bet officials are condemning this latest plot as yet another instance in which terrorists cynically exploit Israel's humanitarian goodwill to permit thousands of desperate and impoverished Gazans into the country to find badly needed jobs. Reaction to Israel's passage of the controversial settlement regulation law has been fast and furious. But even though the Palestinians and much of the international community is condemning the retroactive approval of around 4,000 settlement homes for Jews, several Israeli lawmakers continue to defend the move. ILTV's Aaron Porras joins me in the studio with more on this story. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, how are you?
All right, so tell us about this.
All right, well, the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is branding the law as an aggression against his people. He's now threatening to cut off critical security measures and coordination with Israel in the West Bank. And a couple of rights groups, some NGOs, have paired together with 17 different Palestinian cities and towns in order to throw this law out entirely.
Basically, we are basing our petition on two main arguments. One is that the law violates the IHL, which is the legal framework that should be binding in the West Bank. Second, we are claiming that the Israeli parliament cannot enact any law that violates its constitutional values, and we think that this law is unconstitutional.
Israel's own Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit says he won't defend it at the Supreme Court because he also thinks it's unconstitutional, and many legal commentators don't believe the law will survive judicial challenges.
The state of Israel, when we are talking about Israel, have no sovereignty over there, and the Israeli law is not applying there according to the Israeli government and Knesset. So how come that the Knesset could legislate a law that applies there? If the Knesset can legislate law that applies in the West Bank, why can't it legislate laws that applies in London or Paris?
Israel disputes this and cites biblical, historical, and political connections to the land, as well as security needs. Deputy Israel Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely stands by the law and continues to insist it is both fair and just.
The underlying premise behind the critics of Israel is that this is occupied Palestinian land. This premise is incorrect. Israel has both historic and legal rights to this land, and the law reaches the right balance between the right of the Jewish families to their homes and the right of the owners of these plots of land to get compensation. The legal principle of compensation is known in all Western legal systems. And this principle that Israel adopted this week creates the right justice between the Palestinians and the Jewish families.
The European Union, United Nations, and several international leaders have all spoken out against the law, saying its crossing of a new and dangerous threshold will carry legal consequences for Israel. United States President Donald Trump has so far signaled a softer approach towards Israeli settlement policy. There have even been reports that 20 new apartments, recently approved in the West Bank settlement of Beit El, are funded by an organization headed by the new United States ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. Nevertheless, the settlement issue is likely to top his discussion with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when the two leaders meet in Washington on February 15th.
Now, if you love dogs as much as I do, you'll want to hear this. Everyone knows that Tel Aviv is a world startup capital, but we bet you didn't know that there's now about one dog for every 17 human residents in the coastal city. Well, now Israel's furry friends are about to become just as digitally advanced as their owners. Thanks to City Hall's launching of digidog, none of our furry friends will miss out on their next vaccination because of reminders from the new service, as well as the location of the nearest vet. Subscribers can get text message alerts or check in on an online website about real-time updates on discounted training courses, which beach is the best for walking your dog, and even who's available to take your furry friend out if you're too busy. All of Tel Aviv's special dog events are also listed, including one feature that may actually amaze you, which is the Tel Aviv Film Night for Dogs. All right, now this very exciting archaeological update. The site where the Ark of the Covenant was known to have been stored in Israel for 2 decades is about to be excavated for the very first time. Plans are already getting underway to explore Kiryat Yearim this summer, which is mentioned in the Bible over a dozen times. This town of Judah is just outside of Jerusalem and was inhabited during the period of the Judges and King David. The book of Samuel tells us that the Ark of the Covenant was kept there for at least 2 decades after being returned to the Israelites by the notorious Philistines when they were smitten with disease for having stolen it. The chapter of Exodus describes the ark as a gold-covered wooden chest containing the 2 stone tablets bearing the 10 commandments. Other biblical texts say it also holds Aaron's rod and a pot of manna. King David ultimately brought the ark back to Solomon's temple in his capital of Jerusalem. It's believed to have remained there until the Babylonians destroyed both the city and the temple 587 years before the Common Era. The Ark is undoubtedly the most sought-after biblical artifact in world history, and sorry film fans, not even Indiana Jones has ever found it. But let's hope the new dig is able to turn up some clues as to where it might be. Now, we really want to give you a taste about what's on the minds of real Israelis, so get ready because from now on, we will have a special segment for you every Thursday called Ask Israel, where I hit the streets to ask locals their take on some of our favorite questions to think about. Today, we're going to ask Israel, if you could wake up in the body of one person, who would it be and what would you do? Let's go.
Maybe Oprah Winfrey, and try and just help the world, be a woman of inspiration.
I would wake up in the body of Michelle Obama, I think, right now, and I would just go on vacation and relax and forget about everything that's happening in the world.
I guess dolphin, something like that. Yeah.
What would you do?
Traveling around the sea with my friend, jumping.
The owner of IKEA.
The owner of IKEA?
Yes.
That is a creative answer. Why is that?
From what I've read, he has multi money. That's not the reason. The reason is that when he travels on an aeroplane, he goes tourist class.
If you could wake up as anybody in the world in the morning, who would it be and what would you do?
Oh. Or maybe I would like to be a dancer of Bat Sheva.
אני רוצה להיות איש שיכול לשנות את העולם, שיהיה שלום בכל העולם.
My mom. I don't know why. No, I really love my mom, so maybe, yeah.
כלב.
כלב? כן? למה?
כלב זה טוב מאוד.
If you could wake up in the body of one person, who would it be and what would you do?
Noam Rotem.
Noam Rotem?
Yes, someone.
A singer?
Yes, a singer, rock star, yeah.
Probably Beyonce.
Beyonce?
Yeah.
And what would you do if you were Beyonce?
No, I would do twerking.
Would you come and perform in Israel?
Yes, we are waiting.
If you could wake up in the morning in the body of a different person, who would that be and what would you do?
I would be my wife and lay in bed to wait for my husband to serve me.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow, you have a lucky wife.
She is lucky.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by the University of Haifa, Hebrew Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We're always hearing about Israel's security being top-notch, and of course it has to be. So today's word is bitachon, meaning security. Bitachon can mean a few different things, and we can see these examples all across the Jewish state. From the bitachon checking bags at the mall to the bitachon when you go through customs at the airport, there's no shortage of people keeping us safe. Bitachon isn't always literally security, though. Bitachon can also mean confidence, assurance, and safety. So it's no surprise then that even bituach briut, or health insurance, comes from the same root as the word bitachon. Just remember that there's no reason to worry when you're here visiting the Jewish state, because even when you're least aware, Israel is keeping you safe. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight should be partly cloudy with a low of 48 or 9 degrees Celsius. Over the weekend, temperatures are expected to rise, but there it will be partly cloudy with a chance of light rain and a high of 69 or 21 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.74 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you tonight.